so we're going to start. I call Committee of Supply Section A to order. We are meeting today to continue consideration of the estimates of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. I now recognize the Minister to move the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Resolved that a sum not exceeding $312,344,000 be granted to Her Majesty to defray the expenses of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, Ministry Operations to March 31st, 2023.
Thank you, Minister. I now recognize the member for Saanich North and the Islands. Oh, I am so sorry. Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. And with your indulgence before the member asks a question, I want to correct with apologies an answer that we gave yesterday to the question of agriculture emission reductions. So in the interest of completeness, I want to elaborate on one of the responses to my opposition critic yesterday. The member asked about expected reductions from the agriculture sector, and the answer that I provided included most emissions from agriculture, but excluded those from fossil fuel combustion. Including the additional emissions from fossil fuel combustion in the agricultural sector would result in a 2030 emissions total of 3.7 megatons without any Clean BC measures. Under the Clean BC roadmap, sector emissions in 2030 are estimated to decline to 2.9 megatons, or a reduction of approximately 0.8 megatons. Thank you, and apologies again for missing that in our review yesterday to provide the answer.
Thank you, Minister. I now recognize the member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Madam Chair, and just wanted to follow up quickly on a question. Yesterday asked the question around Indigenous reconciliation, and the Minister referenced the priorities of Indigenous leadership. One of the priorities that they have brought forward is around biodiversity. It's also a key recommendation, recommendation number 2 in the old growth strategic review, and recognizing that's on the forestry side of things. But I am just wanting to ask, I know that the ministry had been working on biodiversity legislation. At some point that had stopped, and I think that as we see the member from Mackenzie, Prince George Mackenzie, talked about biodiversity yesterday in his 2-minute statement. Wondering if the minister could talk about the government's work on biodiversity legislation and the priority within the Ministry of Environment for such legislation.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the member has correctly pointed out that lead authority for biodiversity legislation, including working with the Ministry of Forests on that aspect of recommendation 2 of the Old Growth Strategic Review, has transferred to the Minister of Land, Water and Resource Stewardship. My mandate letter, and so have the staff from my ministry that were working on it. They are now in that ministry. My mandate letter asked me to support the Minister of Land, Water and Resource Stewardship on matters of the Watershed Sustainability Strategy and Fund and protecting biodiversity. And so my ministry and I are eager to do that and willing to do that in whatever way the Minister of Land, Water and Resource Stewardship requests us to support.
Member from Prince George Mackenzie. Oh, sorry.
Fantastic.
My apologies. I moved you. I moved you very, very quickly. Anyway, member from Penticton.
Madam Chair, thank you very much, and through yourself. Minister, always a pleasure to see you and your staff. Minister, just very quickly, if I could pass some notes along to you regarding an issue in Naramata. It's about a sewage issue that's being proposed. I'll just pass it along. Thank you. I'll give it to the gentleman as he comes by. And Minister, I would just ask in consideration, coming from municipal government, one of the biggest issues is that when we do sewer an area on the expense of ongoing operations, when there is a plant that is very close to other communities, I would hope the ministry would consider the opportunity of municipalities working together so that effluent could flow from one municipality to another municipality or to a region, from a regional district into a municipality. It can make a big difference in ongoing operations. It was done during a tenure when I was at the regional district going north into the Kelowna catchment basin. The Greta Ranch area was done, Peachland, another one. So it does work, and I would just ask for further consideration of that. Second of all, I would also ask through yourself, Madam Chair, the opportunity to meet with staff regarding an in-camera issue that both the Minister's ministry and also Agricultural Ministry has in purview at this point in time. And second of all, Minister, again through Madam Chair, is the opportunity for top flight helicopters regarding permitting issues in the Ashenola area, especially now with the Lower Similkameen Indian Band and the issues that they have brought forward regarding the Ashenola in their traditional lands and access to those traditional lands. So it's just a request for those meetings. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the member from Penticton. I know the member has a good reputation for being an effective local politician in his time in municipal government, and I know knows the issues, including liquid waste management plans, very well. The answer to the member's question is if the regional district puts forward a proposal for municipalities working together or receiving effluent, we would welcome that. We're happy to talk about it. We've done that in other cases. I would one example is the village of Anmore working with Metro Vancouver Regional District. The member asked if there could be an in-camera meeting with our staff. Absolutely. On this or any other issue, I think you didn't mention the issue, so I'm not sure what it is, and that is a courtesy I would extend to any member from any party, and so would my staff. If I understand the question about top flight helicopters in National and the permitting, were you asking for a meeting regarding that? Yes, absolutely. We'll arrange that as well. Thank you.
Member?
And thank you, staff. Greatly appreciated. Have a good day. Thank you.
Member from Kamloops, North Thompson.
Thank you. I was a little worried in question period when the speaker said Burnaby, North Thompson. I thought maybe electoral boundaries is really expanding our reach, but yes, yeah, yeah, that's right. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out in follow up to the minister's answer there. With pride, Kamloops and to Kamloops is actually Kamloops provides sewage handling for Kamloops and the reserve in Kamloops as well in partnership there. So that's always worked very well. And it only has one plant then working with the Thompson River instead of two. A couple of questions though for the minister in regards to post-wildfire, specifically more around Lytton. So just some real quick ones. Obviously, we've heard a lot over the last 10 months that Lytton's been trying to get the debris removed, that a lot has to do that it's considered a contaminated site, the whole village. So did the ministry, did anyone within environment direct and make the declaration that Lytton is to be considered a contaminated site? Are they operating and not able to start to remove unless the Ministry of Environment signs off on it? Can we get some insight into that whole process as to how we are still here 10 months later with a contaminated site as a whole town?
Minister.
Chair, and thank you to the member for the question. I think we all know that the residents of Lytton are continually concerned. There's several areas, including contamination, in which they wish answers. Ultimately, they want to get on with their lives and rebuild, and we want to see them do that as well. There has been no declaration of the town of Lytton as a contaminated site, but our experience was that a combination of the fires and the flooding had the potential to leave contamination in the area. So as a result of that, we're working with Emergency Management BC and other ministries to develop a recovery strategy. We worked with Indigenous and non-Indigenous governments to have qualified professionals go in and test for contamination, which would be a standard response if we had reason to expect contamination. So what we are trying to do now to ensure that we protect public health is working with those Indigenous and non-Indigenous governments to develop a broad process for the entire town to conduct the removal in a safe way. We expect by having not a site-by-site removal strategy, but a broad strategy that we will both expedite the speed and reduce the costs for businesses and individuals and governments to do that.
Member?
Thank you. Well, and I thank the minister for that answer, but I think it just leads to more confusion then. A couple things to unpack there. The fire ripped through on July or June 30th. The flood event didn't happen until November, 5 months later. The flood event had nothing to do with Lytton. And in the 10 months, we've seen major rain events, which would have contaminated, if Lytton is truly that contaminated, it would have created runoff. We've had snow events and melt and freshet starting, which would have saw those contaminated pieces flowing away from Lytton into the Fraser River. And at the same time, we saw Monty Lake, which burned down after Lytton, not be required to have the same cleanup conditions applied to it that Lytton have. And we've seen the Lytton First Nations, literally, basically across the road, be fully cleaned out. Site is prepped. They're having housing coming in. They're getting utilities restored. It's great to see. No one begrudges that work happening. But literally, in the exact same area, with the same fire, there has been a completely different response allowed. At the same time, we just saw last week with the tragic fire at the Winters Hotel in Vancouver, that building being demolished almost immediately. The only thing that delayed it was there was a tragic and unfortunate discovery of people's bodies who had lost their lives in those fires, and that's understandable that things would stop so they could get proper investigation. But the initial demolition was immediate and removal. So the people of Lytton are looking for a very clear answer. If there was no actual order about contamination immediately put on place, why they're not allowed in, why it's still fenced off, why they can't come and go to their own privately owned property to start remediation if the Ministry of Environment has not put any contamination order on the town site. People are still needing to wear hazmat suits to be allowed to cross the fenced area after getting permission to enter into where their own private property is. So could we get more clarification, more detail as to why this site post-fire seems to be the only site in British Columbia that gets deemed contaminated, but we can't seem to figure out who has actually made that designation and who is actually preventing people from going back to clean up their properties 10 months after a fire has already ripped through their town.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding is that when we sent people in to test in Lytton following the fire, it was found that the soot and ash from the fire was contaminated with lead and asbestos. The village has determined that that is a risk to public health, and therefore the evacuation order is being continued. But there is nothing from our ministry, nothing from our ministry that prevents that from being removed. There are a number of other factors that have to do with other issues that are potentially slowing it down, but we're simply in the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy waiting for it to be removed. We will then go in and test and certify that the site is clean, which is what the insurance companies will require.
Member?
Thank you. Has the ministry issued any orders to any landfill operations or any disposal ways of the waste that would at all be prohibiting the time frame for the removal in terms of finding a location to send it to for handling and either burial or remediation or anything of that nature? Has there any been orders given or a prevention of any specific sites that it's not allowed to go to?
Thank you to the member for your patience. I apologize for the delay in responding, but I've got a partial answer, and we're trying to get a bit more detail, which we will be able to do over the lunch break and give a more fulsome answer after the break, if that's okay. What I can tell the member is that that we have a full-time staff person who has been working with the Village of Lytton to look at their needs for remediation and determine what's needed in terms of a receiving landfill, and which ones are currently authorized to do that, which ones we'd need to work with to expedite permit amendments to receive it within the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, and I can give a bit more detail after lunch. And Chair, I move that the committee rise, report progress, and ask leave to sit again.
Members, a vote is about to take place. The question is that the committee rise, report progress, and seek leave to sit again. Those in favour indicate aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate nay. Motion is carried. Thank you, members. The committee now stands adjourned.